Good afternoon. Happy Friday, July 11th. This is my second video in which I wanted to share some points from ACA, or Adult Children of Alcoholism and Other Family Dysfunction, and how these points and principles apply to at least me as a survivor of a high control religious group. I believe many of us can apply these points with a background that does have neglect, abuse, grief, shame, and pain in our upbringing. Okay, so this section that I'm reading from today is mainly the doctor's opinion, and then Adult Children of Alcoholics and its beginnings. And I'm just going to read a few parts. So there's an ACA disease model of the adult child, and it has three parts: the body, the mind, and the spirit. And the body can experience PTSD, stored trauma, and neglect. The mind can display the 14 traits called the laundry list, and the spirit is the hidden inner child, according to this model. So if you have the issues in the body or the mind, then you have the other. For instance, if you have trauma and neglect in your past, and you have the 14 traits in the laundry list, or many of them, then you have a hidden inner child. And the hidden inner child, it says here, is the true connection to our higher power. But our inner child went into hiding, and ACA recovery is for reversing this process. So bringing that inner child, that connection to God, out of hiding. And it does remind me of a couple things in the Bible. One is the Lord saying we have to become like this little child to enter the kingdom. And then also just the emphasis on God seeking those who would worship Him in spirit and truthfulness. And that deep inner part of us that is most truthful and is our connection to God, in the Bible may be referred to as the spirit. So anyway, I'm not trying to completely apply this to the three-circle model of the tripartite man, but it does match the body, the mind, and the spirit. Okay, so the doctor's opinion, a few points I just wanted to read. In order to survive, the traumatized child's true self, or child within, or inner child, goes into hiding deep within the unconscious part of its psyche. What emerges is a false self, or ego, which tries to run the show of our life but is unable to succeed simply because it is a defense mechanism against pain and not real. So that false self or ego is not real. It's a defense mechanism against pain. Its motives are based more on needing to be right and in control. Okay, it says when Dr. Silkworth wrote his opinion for AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous, what we now call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, was called combat fatigue, or shell shock, which was thought to be limited to military combat veterans. Today we know that PTSD is far more common and not limited to these soldiers. Okay, it says it has been shown by over 330 scientific research studies on well over 230,000 people worldwide, and this was written in 2006, so a lot more since then, I'm sure. Such trauma may result in hurtful effects that manifest as any one or more of the common so-called mental disorders, from depression to addictions to schizophrenia, and an array of physical disorders, also called trauma spectrum disorders. These illnesses show a strong link with having a history of repeated childhood trauma. So stages of recovery, according to this section, are firstly a stabilization period, where if you have developed addictions and other disorders, then it is best to stabilize these, since otherwise these problems are usually distractions from being able to focus on ACA recovery issues and work. We call the stabilization period stage 1 recovery work, which may take several months to years to complete. Many don't have any particular addictions or disorders, and they come to the recovery perspective or wanting to recover because they're hurting. They're bottoming out from emotional pain, and they have a desire to change. So stage 2 includes 1, realizing our true self, 2, grieving our ungrieved hurts, losses, and traumas, 3, finding and fulfilling our healthy needs, and 4, working through our core recovery issues. And then finally, stage 3 is about refining our relationship with ourself, that true inner child that has been hidden. So refining our relationship with self, others, and God from a spiritual perspective. It becomes easier to realize a loving relationship with our higher power once we have done most of our stage 2 recovery work. This is because the false self or the ego cannot experientially relate to or know God. The only part of us that can do this is our true self, which we come to know in our stage 2 work, while the false self may at best try to intellectualize a relationship with God. Our true self does it from its heart with fewer words needed. It's the inner child, that truest part inside of us. Patience and persistence. In my clinical experience, psychiatric drugs do not eliminate the effects of childhood trauma. And so there is the need for a slow, long, ponderous recovery through attending meetings, ACA meetings, it says here, working the 12 steps, individual counseling, and group therapy. Stage 2 or trauma-focused group therapy long-term are needed often. Just simply taking medication does not eliminate effects of childhood trauma, according to this doctor. And then finally, I just have underlined, an important part of successful recovery is learning to accurately name the components of our inner life as they come up for us, including our various feelings, learning to tolerate emotional pain without trying to medicate it away. And the principle that helps a lot in this is taking one day at a time. Although healing takes a long time, by using this admonition, one day at a time, our outlook can shift immediately, making the journey not only more tolerable, but meaningful, and anchoring us in the present moment, today. As we grieve our buried pain and work through our core recovery issues with patience, we will slowly release our past unresolved internal conflicts. We gradually discover that our future is a destination not yet determined. Our life is in the present, which is where we can eventually find peace. And that's Charles Whitfield, MD, Atlanta, Georgia, 2006. Now I want to share a little bit from the section Adult Children of Alcoholics and its Beginnings. And this is still Roman numeral numbered pages. It's not the heart of the book yet. These are like sections that introduce the big book for ACA. Tony said that he was 30 years older than some of those he met with first, but their age difference dissolved when he began telling his story. When we began, Tony said, there was a wonderful feeling of mutual love, empathy, and understanding. And I hope that we all could just have that as we travel this journey together for healing. So then it says, another thing I have underlined is the dysfunctional family rules, or I would say even the Lord's Recovery family rules of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, were being challenged. So don't talk, don't trust, don't feel may be rules that you have established, that you've grown to practice in a high control religious group. But as we become honest and tell our stories and listen with love, empathy, and understanding, then those rules can be challenged. We would talk, we would trust, and we would feel. Alcoholism and other family dysfunction can and does cause lifelong patterns of dysfunctional behavior, even for those who never take a drink. The family system's concept of addiction and family dysfunction are not focused on individual addicts, but the disease of family dysfunction has long-range effects on the children who become adults. I have underlined, the adult child looks at the patterns of family dysfunction, and I would say of religious group dysfunction, and is encouraged to talk about all aspects of the childhood. And I just want to encourage you to talk through all aspects of your childhood, growing up in possibly a family that was dysfunctional, but also possibly a high control religious group. And just by virtue of being high control, a religious group is dysfunctional. Okay, then I just want to read this last little bit. Adult child means when confronted, we regress to a stage in our childhood, in addition to the fact that we were children growing up in alcoholism or other dysfunction. But it means also when confronted, we regress to a stage in our childhood. There are 3 parts of me, Tony A. said. The higher power, me, and little Tony. I have to love little Tony, my child within, if I'm ever going to unite with God. Little Tony is my connection to God. So I don't want to get all philosophical, or this isn't a Bible study. Within all of us, we could have God, we could have this kind of false self built up as a defense mechanism, and we could have our true self, our little child in us, and we have to learn to love that little child, that true part of us. For some of you, you may call it your human spirit. Love that little genuine part that has always been in there, and you have to love that part if you're ever going to unite with God. Little Tony, or maybe you can put in your name. So for me, little Ruthie. Little Ruthie is my connection to God, my human spirit, my true inner part. Little Ruthie, my connection to God. Okay, I realized I had a little bit more to cover in adult children of alcoholics and its beginnings, and that is a little part that is related to ACA in California that began in the years of 1976 to 1979, and it focuses on Jack's story, who was a founding member of ACA in California. He just shared how his grandparents were alcoholics, but he never heard about it from his parents because at that time, as is a lot of the case now, alcoholism was considered shameful. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that alcoholism is a disease. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is a disease. And it needs to be destigmatized, as well as addiction. Addiction is not something to be ashamed of. Addiction is a disease. Any families dealing with alcoholism and addiction should not be ashamed nor shamed by the community, but realize that they are battling a very cunning and powerful disease. Anyway, so Jack continues, it was not then considered to be a disease, but a weakness. So the drinking of his grandparents was never mentioned to him. Jack continues, I grew up to be an alcoholic who drank and married other alcoholics. I was not conscious of wanting to rescue and be rescued, but those feelings were below the surface. So he was an adult child of alcoholism. He talks about the beginning of ACA in California, and I just want to read this one sentence. We felt a deep commitment to unconditional love. of self and parents and higher power, just as ACAs do today. And so as I talk about the application of principles of ACA to those of us who suffered growing up in a high control religious group, I just want to underscore this. We have an unconditional, or I hope we would have an unconditional love of self, a love of that little child that is in you that probably went into hiding. So for me, that love, an unconditional love for little Ruthie, and an unconditional love for every parent, my in-laws, my biological parents. This is not a matter of blaming. It's a matter of understanding and working through trauma. An unconditional love for any of our spiritual parents, any of those who cared for us or did their best to care for us, even in the system of a high control religious group, like the Lord's Recovery. I have many who cared for me in that group, and they did their best, just as biological parents or in-laws do their best. But we've got to understand the trauma that we endured, and then an unconditional love for our higher power, an unconditional love for God. Love God unconditionally and know that you are loved unconditionally. So I think I'll stop here. I don't know when I will comment related to how these things relate specifically to my experience in the Lord's Recovery, but I would say that there was definitely a pattern of don't feel, don't talk. I'm still under threats to not be talking out, even about my experiences now. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And I just like to say those rules are not my rules anymore. And I hope they would not be your rules either, that you would talk, you would be with those and find those you can trust, and you would definitely feel. Feelings are cues, they're signals regarding where we're at and what our needs are. So feel and get to know those inner workings within you. Take care.